Pledge of Allegiance.
Stand for pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good evening. All right, I will start this evening's meeting with a roll call. Patrice Scott is here. Butch Cushing.
Present.
Howard Burnham.
Present.
Freeman Plummer.
Present.
Omer C. Aker is excused, and we have his alternate, Tom McLaughlin.
Here.
Present. Thank you. All right, has everybody had a chance to look at the draft minutes from the last meeting on January 3rd? I've read through the draft, and I didn't see any corrections or anything.
Make a motion we accept them as presented.
Okay, anybody else?
Second.
Okay, Butch second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Okay, Howard. All right, those are adopted as presented. Now, we have election of officers on our agenda, but we can't do that this evening because we're missing our regular, and we understand 3 of the members need to be reappointed by the selectmen. So we're carrying over till the next meeting, and that's when we'll elect the officers. Okay, now we can begin a public hearing on case 2007-009, a request for 2 special exceptions and a variance. It's relief from Article 3, Section 4, for proposed multi-unit housing on parcel 2007-009 Fairgrounds Road. This parcel is in the agricultural zone. All right, do we have someone here that would like to present the application?
Would you like?
Oh, and if you're comfortable up there, that's
I
fine.
would rather sit
Okay, that would be fine. If you'd like to come pull a chair up,
and,
you could pull a chair up
Need
if
to
you
make
need.
sure you have a microphone.
Right, so we can, yeah, we can pull this so people can hear you, and you want to get a, or you want a more comfortable seat, there's over there.
some copies of some exhibits. By the way, just for the record, my name is Mark Puffer,
Okay, Mr. Puffer.
and I represent the applicant. And the applicant here is Daniel White is my
Okay.
client, or White Properties, Plymouth White Properties, LLC.
Okay,
But it's really Dan White.
Hey, you can take this last corner if you want. Sit right back
is that
over there.
easier?
over
to
there?
Come over here? Yeah, actually, there's.
That would be
that's good.
fantastic.
Great.
You need another chair or something?
You know, got that nice big comfortable.
Perfect. Of the exhibits that I wanted to go through, I made enough copies so that everybody can have one of these booklets.
Great.
We ran out of black ones, so some people are getting white ones, but they're all the same.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my client, Dan White, or White Properties, has a purchase and sale agreement with the owner. The owner are the McLeods,
Okay.
who live across the street. We do have in the purchase and sale agreement, there are some deadlines that we have, which we may need to get extended, depending upon what happens tonight and what subsequently happens with the planning board. And we fully understand we need to go to the planning board also
Right.
for a project of this sort. But our thought was to try to get some kind of sense as to what might be allowed in terms of the numbers of units and the density that might be allowed, so that when we go to the planning board, we can present a fully engineered plan to them. So let me, if I can, and I tried to lay these exhibits out in the order in which I would talk about them. I don't know if you are all familiar with the property, but it's located on Fairgrounds Road, and it's shown in Exhibit 1. Actually, that is more than what is now the property. But that was the original property that was owned for many, many years by the McLeods, who live across the street. So I'm looking at tax map 207, lot 9. Outlined it in red or pink here, just for ease in looking at it. But the McLeods do not own that still, but that was just to give you an idea of the property that they owned at one time. If you look at Exhibit 2, this is the boundary line adjustment plan, and you can see what was the McLeod's property that was shown on Exhibit 1. And it came all the way around, circled all the way around the church properties. So a boundary line adjustment has been done, and those two properties have been sold off that you see that are shaded there on Exhibit 2. So what they now own is the 5.4 acres that has, I believe it's a little over 200 feet of frontage on Fairgrounds Road. And then extends back, and there's a field, and then there's some wetlands to the rear of that. The property is, interestingly, has churches on either side of it along Fairgrounds Road. There is just to the east of the property is the Plymouth United Methodist Church. And just to the west of the property is the Church of Latter-day Saints. There's also this is an agricultural zone, however, there is some commercial development in the area. Almost across the street from the property is a business called Small Engine Barn. It's to be small machine repair shop. Looks like it's been there for quite a number of years. 0.2 of a mile away, going easterly on Fairgrounds Road, is a landscaping business, Three Lakes Landscaping. 1/10 of a mile to the east, on the other side of the road, is the Precious Angels Daycare Center. So, and there are other businesses along Fairgrounds Road as well. By and large, you know, coming from downtown Plymouth and so forth, once you get on Fairgrounds Road, it's single-family residential. But they do have those businesses and then the two churches right directly on either side of the property. So that's just try to give you and some of you may be intimately familiar with the property. The field itself that goes back where most of the buildings would be located is pretty flat. We have not had a wetland scientist do it yet due to the weather. We had hoped to be able to do that by now, but we haven't been able to due to the weather. That might be something more appropriate for the planning board to look at down the road. We'll see. But you're certainly entitled to have that information as well if you believe that you need it. Let's see what else we have. On Exhibit 3 is a schematic, and John Oddie is here from the architects. And John, you want to briefly describe what you've done on Exhibit 3, and this is just the site plan study.
John Oddie, Sam DeLee Architects. We did a little study here on how best to use the available buildable land that was presented on this property. And to make it work, we were looking at initially 4 6-unit buildings, and it just did not work with the layout of the available land in the configuration that those would fit on there comfortably. So I broke it up into 2 6-unit buildings and then 4 3-unit buildings, set them back off of the Fairgrounds Road, 86 some feet from the property line, so that there would be a good buffer up to the road. And then the buildings are broken up. There are usually 30 feet between them and the first group of buildings, so there's a lot of space between them. And then along in the back, there are wider open areas that are nestled in between the 4 and 6 unit buildings. These buildings have their own parking inside on the first floor, so there would not be cars out on the driveway, hopefully most of the time. But we did provide additional parking for guests and anybody that came there during the day to visit. And the configuration such as using the land, we feel in the best manner to keep areas open so that, there's not a crowding of the units, and also to, as I say, to keep them back from the road. So as you come down Fairgrounds Road, these buildings are not right up on the highway there. I also spoke to a gentleman from the DOT about the sight lines. He requires 400 feet up and down Fairgrounds Road from our property. He at the time looked on the computer and found the property that they have and looked at it and said that the sight lines, as he sees it right now, are more than acceptable because we're on a straight shot, and that for this type of development, he recommends a 24-foot wide driveway in, and which is easy to accommodate in and out traffic. Also, that 400-foot sight line is based on a seated driver being able to look down the road either direction for 400 feet. And this clearly was, I think, identified on this little sketch here where the 400-foot is. And then we left the tree buffer on either side of the property to give us a natural landscape buffer between the two churches. So those are going to be maintained. And then, of course, we're up against the wetlands in the back. The wetland, I guess the top of the ridge back there was just walked out by the surveyors prior to the heavy snow, so at least they knew where it was, and that's how we based this 3.3 acres that we worked from. So, do you have any questions?
Do you know what kind of wetlands we're talking about, or just soggy property right now? We don't know.
It's heavily treed back there. Mm-hmm. There is a passage through on a culvert. Other than that, because of the weather since December, we haven't been able to get anybody in there to adequately survey that. So hopefully the field is clear now, and if we proceed on, we should be able to have that shortly.
So how big is the lot, the total lot?
The acreage on the lot's 5.4.
You can use 3.3?
And 3.3 is assumed to be the buildable area currently.
Just for everyone's information, the surveyors are here at the meeting this evening, too, if
Okay.
you have additional questions.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so there's, we believe, subject to further study, there's 3.3 developable or buildable acres per your ordinance, and so that would leave the 2.1 of wetlands or other undevelopable or unbuildable land to the rear.
Okay.
John, you want to, let me give you another copy of this. Would you want to explain Exhibits 4 and 5 to them? Exhibits 4 and 5 are also part of the application. That the zoning board needs an Exhibit 4, but I think John was trying to give a little schematic of what a typical unit would look like and spoke a little bit about it. Could you just explain?
Yeah, as a request of the developer, he wanted to be able to park 2 cars, get them inside so they're not out in the weather, and also visible on the property as much as possible. So we have a lower level entrance, 2-car parking area, and then an interior stairs that takes you up to the main living area. And that opens onto a back deck that has access down to the grounds. And then the 3rd floor has a master bedroom and 2 small bedrooms with 2 bathrooms. Also all with views of the wood areas. These are kind of flip-flop back and forth against each other. That's how they best worked out. And Exhibit 5 is just looking at the 5.4 total acres, approximately 3.3 acres is buildable, 2.1 acres to be are wetlands to be confirmed with the soil scientist. We think there might be a little bit less than that, might be more buildable land, but we just haven't been able to verify that at this time. And then I just went through and did some math, 3.3 buildable acres times square foot per acre. It gives us what we have is, at this time, totalable billable. And then the lot coverage is 75%. Gives me a figure to work with. And then from that, I took the footprint of the buildings, the road areas, stairs, anything that was a built environment, and subtracted that out. And I was left with, about 60,000 something, or 41, excuse me, 41, 66, 41,000 square feet still left open that was not developed under that 75% coverage allowance.
I'm sorry, John, did you say that's on the 3.3 available?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a little less than an acre.
So a little less than an acre that we've left open for areas in and around the buildings for common areas, play areas, and such.
Does that include the roads and stuff?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think up here it says driveway and parking coverage is 41,000 square feet of parking and driveway.
And do you know what you plan to do with the open space or the common areas?
Well, just developed, it might be a play area for kids, small garden area up in the back corner, mostly, hopefully just left open. Between the buildings, there's a setback we use for fire setback of 30 feet. That's also part of that common open area. So there's, like I say, almost an acre of land in and around the buildings that is left open for the renters to enjoy.
And that's part of the 3.3.
Yes.
Developable, yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, does anyone else have any questions for our architect? Thank you.
Okay.
So I've tried to give you a little gist of the neighborhood and where the property lies and so forth, and have John also give you the basics on what's being proposed. So what we're here on tonight is there's really two applications for special exceptions. I mean, it's technically one application, but it's for two special exceptions, and it's for one variance. So in Article 6, it's simply a copy of certain pages from your zoning ordinance. In there, I tried to highlight the provisions of your ordinance that cause the need for the special exceptions and the variance. So in Exhibit 6, and these are just, I'm going to use the pages of your ordinance. I think this is pages 13 through 16, 13 through 17. On what is page 14 of your ordinance, you can see what is allowed at the chart, the uses chart, different residential uses that are allowed. Multiple unit dwellings of 3 to 6 units may be allowed, but by special exception. So that's one of the special exceptions we need. In other words, if you're proposing a single-family dwelling, for example, you don't need a special exception, but if you want something from between 3 to 6 units, which is what is being proposed here. There are the 2 6-unit buildings and the 4 3-unit buildings. You need a special exception for that. 2 pages from that is you also need, in the agricultural zone, a special exception for more than one main structure on the property, on any property. In other words, not accessory buildings, but main or primary structures. So there's two special exceptions we need. One, because we're proposing multifamily units of between 3 and 6, multifamily buildings of between 3 and 6 units, and we're proposing more than one. In fact, we're proposing 6 main structures on the property. The variance that we need, and I'll get more into the details on that in a few minutes, but turn to the next page, page 17, and I've tried to highlight here what I think are the key provisions. It basically sets forth how much land you need, in other words, the minimum lot size, which we interpret to be the minimum lot size of developable land, not the entire property here, of which we have the 3.3 acres. So what it's basically saying is that under your ordinance in the agricultural district, for a 3-unit building, for each 3-unit building, you'd need 46,060 square feet. And for a 6-unit building, you need 53,560 square feet for each building. So in other words, the more 3-unit buildings you propose, the more space you're going to need. We could have said, we'll have 4 6-unit buildings, and therefore we're going to need less square feet, but architecturally, aesthetically, and just livability, we wanted to propose 3-unit buildings as well. So that's the variance that we need, because we don't have enough developable land to have the 24 units that are being proposed. So, one important element we believe as we studied the Fairgrounds Road area and Plymouth generally, was that along Fairgrounds Road there are 2 in particular multifamily dwelling projects that have been constructed there that we think have densities similar and properties characteristics similar to what we're hoping to build here on this property. And the first one is the Pemmy Commons property, and that is along Fairgrounds Road, and we went out just before we came here. It is approximately 4/10 of a mile east and on the same side of the road as the subject property. So as you're going out Fairgrounds, it's 4/10 of a mile before you get there. So that's Pemmy Commons. Pemmy Commons is 16 units of elderly housing, and it's 16 units of elderly housing on only about 2 developable acres. So I think what we're proposing, 24 on the 3.3, compares favorably to that in terms of the numbers of units. If you extrapolate it out and use the same formula, we'd be entitled to 26, but we're not proposing that. In other words, if it used the same proportion of developable space to the numbers of units. So that that was the tax card, just for your informational purposes, is Exhibit 7. That's for the Pemmy Commons, and as you can see under the narrative description, the parcel contains 3.65 acres of land, but only about 2 are developable. Mm-hmm. And that it contains the 16 units of elderly housing. And the Pemmy Commons property too on Exhibit 8, and this was taken from the town's file when they had to apply for various approvals. This is actually one building.
That's what I thought. I think it's like.
I'm sorry?
It's like one building, huh?
Yes. Yeah, it's one building of.
So they must have got a variance for that. Yes. They have more than one. Yes.
I believe they did. Yeah, they got a variance for that. And I believe, and Sharon can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember from reading from the minutes, they originally applied for a residential institutional, because then they wouldn't need a variance for numbers of units. Mm-hmm. And that was denied, but they got a variance for density anyway. Sharon, can you?
That was a while ago, but I mean, I think it was, because it was one building and it was configured with a common area, That's where that definition of residential institutional was applied. And because it was, what was it, 58 and older, or 62, what's classified as elderly housing, because it's somewhat subsidized in the payment pyramid, or the rental pyramid. But I'd have to pull the file and look at it
Yeah.
directly. I know you looked at it, but that was several years ago.
Yeah, I think, and Exhibit 9 was the ZBA's decision. We went through a series of hearings, but ultimately ended up with, this was, I believe, the ZBA's final decision on it. And as you can see, they granted a variance from Article 3, Section 304. That's the one that I pointed you to that had the numbers of units in it, or the density provisions of your ordinance.
6 years ago.
So this was 6 years ago? Yeah, it looks like it was granted in May of 2011. And so they got a variance from Section 304, the general density parameters for multi-unit dwellings allowed in the agricultural zone. And there's a reference there to Section 304, the table of uses. And it was, the zoning ordinance, as we talked about a minute ago, caps the number of units per building at 6. And you're supposed to be able to, by special exception, you can only get up to 6. So they actually needed a variance because they wanted to put all the 16 units in one building. And they got a variance for that. So they got a general variance. It's described above the 3 to 6 unit maximum. They also, by the way, got a special exception regarding the parking. And I think on the basis that it was elderly housing and therefore there would be less need for parking that might be, we're proposing here not elderly, not affordable, but market rate housing. And we're not seeking any variance or special exception for less parking. We're proposing more than what is actually required by your ordinance. Especially if you count the 2 parking spaces beneath each unit, but then there are also additional parking spaces spread around the property. So we're not seeking that one, special exception that they needed. So that's the Pemmy Commons property. The other one that I think is helpful to sort of, and by the way, I think all of these 2 examples of multifamily dwelling developments along Fairgrounds Road are helpful to you in determining the criteria for granting a special exception or for a variance. In other words, that there are in the neighborhood 4/10 of a mile away and then another a mile away developments that have multifamily dwellings bear on a number of the special exception or variance criteria. One of the special exception criteria, for example, is you need to explain how the specific site is an appropriate location for the proposed use. We think the availability or the existence of multifamily dwelling projects along this road make this an appropriate location. Another characteristic, another finding that you need to make for granting a special exception is explain how the use as developed will not adversely affect the character of the area in which the proposed use will be located. So again, the fact that there exist these other multifamily dwelling projects we think is key. In terms of a variance, explain how the granting of the variance will not diminish the value of surrounding properties. And you can see that we think it doesn't diminish the value of neighboring properties by allowing an increased density, because there are 2 projects that have a similar density to what we're proposing here. So anyway, this property, the Plymouth Woods project, is affordable housing. It's exactly 1 mile to the east along Fairgrounds Road from the subject property. And they have 24 units there. And Exhibit 10 is just the tax cards for that property as sort of general background. The property is presently owned by Plymouth Woods Limited Partnership. Sharon might know the answer to this, but I don't. On the tax cards, there's 4 tax cards, and they have they show 6, 6, 7, and 6 units, which adds up to one more than 24. And I'm not sure why that's the case.
I wasn't actually here when this, or didn't deal with it, so I don't have any of the preliminary knowledge, but I think perhaps, one unit is an office.
Oh, that could be.
It's not a dwelling. I
Yeah.
think it's the management office.
Okay.
Yeah, of the entity that's overseeing it.
But they had applied for 24 units and got approval for that, for the affordable housing project. That's Exhibit 10. On Exhibit 11 is a plan of that property. And as you can see, the schematic here, the plan, shows 4 main buildings on the property, and each of those are 6-unit buildings. Although, as Sharon indicated, there might be one that has an office or perhaps even living quarters in it, but we'll call it 4 6-unit buildings. Again, we did not want to propose 4 6-unit buildings. It would have lessened the square footage requirement for us. It would therefore have increased the density allowance for us for numbers of units, but we didn't want to propose that because we wanted something a little more spread out and aesthetically pleasing. Interestingly, this project originally was turned down. By the way, they had to apply for and get the same 2 special exception approvals that we had to get, because they were proposing buildings of 3 to 6 units. That's one special exception, and the other one is that they have more than one main building, more than one main structure on the property they were proposing for. So interestingly, it was originally turned down because they did not have access to Fairgrounds Road. Their access was going to be by Allen Avenue, which is, I think, just slightly to the east of the property, and they were going to come in that way, and those neighbors were concerned about that in that direction, and so they were turned down. They went out and they got additional land. They bought additional land so they had access to Fairgrounds Road, and that's what we have as well, although I think our site distance is probably better than this one and certainly better than the Pemmy Commons one, but anyway, that sort of shows the importance, I think, of having the frontage as we do on Fairgrounds Road. And there's no question about we have, for the lot size there, we have over the 100 feet that's required. So those are the 2 projects here, and I'll just briefly explain. 12 is what document that I got from the town's zoning board file or land use file on this project. And this was the one, I believe, where they had originally, they turned them down because they didn't have access to Fairgrounds Road. And then Exhibit 13 is the planner's summary, which explains that they were turned down, but now they bought a parcel with frontage on Fairgrounds Road, added it to their property, and they proceeded to get approval for that project. So those are the 2 that we think are helpful and show that this is an area that has accommodated multifamily dwellings projects, and that's what we're proposing here. Any questions about either of those projects or about this, or about our proposed project?
Anybody have any questions? Tom?
I'd just say that, you know, it's handy that you can point to these other two projects, and there's actually a third down there too. But, you know, we kind of have to look at that you've also got, there's other 5-10 acre fields out there for sale, and then there's the fairgrounds that's still up in the air. So, you know,
And I'm sorry,
when we start giving variances, you know, that's, we're gonna be hearing somebody else coming back and going, well, look at now, we had, you know, 3 of these. So it's kind of a little bit of a double-edged sword
Yeah.
with the variances that, you know, neighbors do righteously have, you know, your point now, it makes for a good point, but from our side, it's a little bit more, you gotta be very cautious about it, because you're gonna set a precedent, and other people are gonna wanna come in under that precedent.
I think you don't want to set any undue precedents. We're just trying to point out that there are these
I get
other
it, yeah.
projects, and so it is compatible with the neighborhood, and we're not the first in, so to speak. I think it bears on whether it's an appropriate location for the property, whether it'll adversely affect the character of the neighborhood, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you kind of answered that with the one, just the line, I forget what you said there on that. What was your sentiment on that about affecting the character and all that?
Well, one of the special exception criteria is that there needs to be a finding that the proposed use will not adversely affect the character of the area in which the proposed use is to be located. So that's why we point out these other projects. I mean,
Oh, I see, so you're pointing to these as being the neighborhood that's being affected,
correct,
that has already been affected.
correct.
Oh,
So that's why I think, that's the main reason we bring these other projects up, is that it's not as though it's strictly a single-family neighborhood into which we want to put 24 units of housing on a single property. It's a neighborhood, it's a mixed neighborhood. There's commercial uses there, there's the landscaping business, there's the machine shop business, there's the daycare center and so forth. And there are these 2 multifamily dwelling projects that exist. And perhaps there's another one too, you mentioned, that along the street that I'm not aware of. But these were the 2 main ones that we were aware of and that we got the information on. So, yes, sir.
Mr. Puffer, when you make the argument with unit to unit, it sounds like a good argument. When you're talking about the senior housing, we're talking about 16 units with 16 bedrooms, okay? When you talk about the workforce housing, we're talking about 43 bedrooms, and your proposal is 72 bedrooms, okay? So I think they're all different. So then, you know, you can say unit to unit, where you're comparing unit to unit, but you're not comparing unit to unit, because you're comparing 3-bedroom units, 24 of them, to 16 one-bedroom apartments, and then the workforce housing has 6 one-bedroom units, 14 two-bedroom units, and 3 three-bedroom units. Okay, so they're very different. If you're just going to say unit to unit, that's fine, but they're not comparable units.
And what does that add up to in terms of bedrooms for the affordable? I know it's 24 units.
Your 24 units is 72 bedrooms,
Yes.
and the workforce housing is 43 bedrooms. It says right on the plan
It
that
is,
you
yeah.
gave us, 6 one-bedroom units, 14 two-bedroom units, which is 28 plus 6, and then 28, 6, and 9.
Which one, I'm sorry, which one is that?
Workforce housing is
Plymouth Woods.
Plymouth Woods.
Right.
It's
That's
Exhibit
the way it was
11.
presented to us.
Exhibit 11, okay. Yeah.
That's
And
43
is that right, we're
bedrooms.
proposing 3-bedroom units?
That's correct.
Well, that's the way we initially have done it. Some may turn the 2 then on the market. That's how we decided.
Right.
It's just a feasibility, or it's just a preliminary design, just to get this going. So that size of building, can we put it on the property and get them on there and still have adequate space for all the roads, dumpsters, everything's screened off, open areas, and each unit has good visibility, you know, to the trees and things like that. So it's not just forcing them in there. They seem to fit in fairly well. onto that property. So whether there are 3 or 2, I think that'll be a decision that'll be made by the developer shortly. So the housing is looking to capture more like professors that may come to Plymouth State and not sure they're going to be staying here, or the professionals in the area for medical and stuff. So that's what this is looking to do.
Okay.
So, but you have to, if somebody, when you get over a certain size, you've got to conform to all the regulations, so you kind of have to rent to whoever knocks on your door, and if they're, you know, however they're funded, you've got to deal with that.
Well, that's true. We can't discriminate.
Did they do some marketing studies or anything like that to lead up to make them think that this is going to be so successful?
None that we're privy to at this time. The
Really?
developer's been in the area for a while, and I'm not sure of all the other properties that he's worked with, but he's in the Lakes region.
Oh, he has some other properties up here. Oh.
He lives in Bristol, I believe.
Yeah.
And I know
Okay.
I thought he was from Bedford, New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's what one of his, the literature said.
that's where he works.
Okay. All right.
That's his business address.
Okay, now, Mr. Puffer, I was just going to clarify, you haven't used the term workforce housing. That's not what you're looking for. You're using market.
Correct, market rate housing, that's what
market
we're
rate.
proposing.
Okay. I was just wondering, in the context of Plymouth, I know a while ago we had the workforce housing studies and the numbers of units that were available in Plymouth, and so I just wondered if you don't fit into that, or you haven't,
No,
because you're not targeting that.
correct,
Okay.
correct. And in terms of marketability study, I think, I mean, with all due respect, I think if he makes a bad financial decision, that's his problem, you know, but.
Well,
but-
that's debatable when you look at some of the other projects, like up to, we've had quite a few projects fail, and they wind up just being rented out to whomever, and
Yeah,
that
Yeah,
is,
he's-
that the sustainability and the, you know, the financial functionality of the thing is,
yeah, I mean, he's not gonna go forward if this isn't financially feasible. You know, he can't, you know, so where to this board first, before the planning board, before anything, to try to see what might be allowed there, in terms of numbers of units, numbers of bedrooms, whatever, on the property. And,
it's gonna be difficult to get real specific on that from, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'm just an alternate here, the guy couldn't show up, but the wetlands has really gone from, to be kind of an exact science in defining the wetlands, that, you know, what we're gonna be, what you're actually gonna have there, and it's, you know, it's quite a process, and you're saying I want a variance, you know, based on this measurement that we think we have, and we
Yeah.
really don't know if that's going to expand or contract.
yeah, were you to grant approval for whatever tonight, I mean, you would be contingent upon the representation we're making, that there's 3.3
Yeah.
developable
Oh,
acres.
I see.
And if it turns out not to be, if it's 2.7 or whatever, then, you know, that's our concern. That's our problem. But, yeah, he's not gonna go forward. He's trying to see what might be feasible.
Sure.
As I said, he has a purchase and sale agreement, but of course contingent upon getting approvals
Yeah.
to do a certain number of housing units.
What also makes this project viable is the fact that it's right at the end of the water and sewer run down Fairgrounds Road. So we've got fire hydrant, we've got sewer, we've got water.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons that this is one of the last pieces that can take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I did speak to I think it was the superintendent, what's his name, of the water.
Water and sewer.
Jason, yeah.
Yeah. And water and sewer does go out this far
Yeah.
along Fairgrounds Road, and he said it would not be a problem hooking in. You're gonna have to pay,
Yeah.
because you're gonna have to, with a project of this scope, you're gonna need to expand the water and sewer lines.
A 6-unit building, you need fire sprinklers too.
Yes,
My God, I looked at the first and go, they wanted a $30,000 hookup fee for a fire. For, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So, and the developer understands, he's gonna have to pay for that to upgrade the connections, from the street and into the project as deemed appropriate by the water and sewer district. So again, in response to Member Burnham's inquiry about the number of beds, I mean, it's your prerogative to limit the number of units. It's your prerogative to limit the number, I suppose, of bedrooms, total of bedrooms, and then they can design around that. But that's what we're trying to seek is approval for the 24 times 3. That's what we're seeking. So if I could just deal with the applications for special exception first. I think those are, again, that was special exceptions are because we want 3 to 6 unit buildings, and because we want more than one principal or main building on the property. In your special exception application, is the proposed use allowed in this ordinance by special exception? Yes, it is. And number 2, explain how the specific site is an appropriate location and of adequate size for the use. We believe it's an appropriate location because of the different commercial and other uses around it. It's fortuitously surrounded by churches on either side. So we're not impacting on single-family dwellings. Churches are not 24/7 uses, and to my knowledge, there's no objection from either of them about the project. Is it adequate size? That really gets into density, and I'll talk more about the density of the project in a minute, and why I think the number of units that we're proposing is reasonable. So this is again, it's a mixed-use neighborhood all along Fairgrounds Road. There are several commercial uses. There are a number of single-family residences, and there are the 2, at least, maybe 3, multifamily dwelling developments. Number 3, explain how the use as developed will not adversely affect the character of the area in which the proposed use will be located. Well, again, we would focus on the Pemmy Commons and the Plymouth Woods projects that help to define the development along Fairgrounds Road. The project will also be well landscaped, as Mr. Oddie described. We're going to leave the tree lines in on either side of the property as you go back from Fairgrounds Road. We're going to leave that in, and the dwelling units are set back. I think he said 86 feet was the closest one, the 3-unit one closest to Fairgrounds Road. Explain how there will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. As Mr. Oddie explained, NHDOT has weighed in on this. It appears that the property has all-season safe site distance that's adequate per the DOT's regulations. There will only be the one point of access, of course, out to Fairgrounds Road. And on that point, on the DOT approval, we would expect any approval by this board or the planning board to be conditioned upon getting the appropriate permits from DOT and fulfilling whatever conditions that the DOT may impose. Explain how the use will not place excessive or undue burden on town services and facilities. Well, again, we're talking about the water and sewer systems are there. We understand there is adequate capacity. We're going to have to pay for it. We're going to have to pay to upgrade, but it's there, and and it doesn't unduly impact on the water and sewer systems. Yes, sir.
Just say that there's enough sewer. That's kind of a small piece of the pie. You also have the schools, and you have the road. That road has no sidewalks on it. you know.
Also, Plymouth Woods has 6.11 acres, and they met all the setback requirements and the minimum lot size in the ag zone, and you have 3.2 acres.
Okay, well, let's get through, let Mr. Puffer get through his presentation, and then we can discuss.
Okay.
Sure.
I just wanted to point that out about
Yeah.
that there's more things than just, I know they pointed to sewer, and that's
That's
great,
right.
we got that
There's-
sewer capacity.
Your impact.
And I don't want to surprise him as the debate goes on, that
Yeah.
that pops up and, you
Yeah,
know.
and I don't mind
good.
questions as we go along. I think I'd rather have a give and take than just
Okay.
talk and then you
Okay,
talk.
because we still have to hear from the public, too.
Yep. But in terms of sidewalks, you're right, there are no sidewalks, I don't believe, anywhere on
No,
Fairgrounds Road.
there's no, a lot of Plymouth doesn't have sidewalks.
Yeah, yeah. And schools, you know, there's been no study, we haven't presented anything, we don't have any information on the impact on schools. I know from the record, if I recall correctly, when when Plymouth Woods went in, they did a study as to their 24 units, and the school superintendent said there would be no undue impact. And in fact, the school system, as in most places after the baby boom, the school systems have less kids than they did probably 10, 15 years ago.
And Mr. Puffer, that's the same for the college.
I'm sorry?
That's the same for the college.
Well,
For the college
Less,
students. We
yeah,
have a lot less college
less
students.
college students.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when you talk about housing for college professors, Plymouth State's cutting programs. They're not adding programs at this point.
Yeah, oh,
So
that's true.
The final special exception criteria would be, explain how there would be no significant effect resulting from such use upon public health, safety, and general welfare. Well, that one sort of subsumes, or takes into consideration a lot of the criteria we just talked about. We're talking about NHDOT and the safe site distance in terms of safety and public health. Water and sewer, it's going to be on public water and sewer, so there should be no effect there. I don't think there's going to be any significant effect negatively on those aspects. So those are the applications for special exception. The one for a variance is, I'll go through the variance criteria, and that one really is for the density. If you look at, I think it was back to Exhibit 3, excuse me, no. Exhibit 6 was the zoning ordinance provisions. It's part of your ordinance. And it basically says, look, if you're going to have 6 units, you need 53,560 square feet for each 6-unit building. You need 46,060 square feet for each 3-unit building. So we tried to work with those numbers and figure out, you know, how much developable space we have and what we might need. There are provisions as set forth in the planner summary about the planning board being able to grant a density bonus based upon the amount of undeveloped land you have. We have the 2.1 acres that will not be developed. And so when you leave land in its undeveloped state and promise to do that in perpetuity, the planning board can, under the cluster or open space provisions, grant you a density bonus above and beyond what these requirements are here. So what I've tried to do see if I can explain this without tripping over myself too much. On Exhibit 14, so applying those provisions, this is the actual proposal, which is for 4 3-unit buildings and 2 6-unit buildings. So we have at the top, we have 3.3 acres, which is 143,748 square feet of developable land, and again, that's subject to proof thereof, either before the planning board or from this board, or before this board. And then if you look at your zoning ordinance, section 3.04, again, it was just the provisions that I just talked about a couple seconds ago, that you need so many square feet for each 6-unit building and so many square feet for each 3-unit building. So if you look at that, where here we have, and that's a typo there. I don't know if it was me or my assistant, but I'll take the blame. It should be 2 by 53,560, and it should be 4 times 46,060 in terms of the amount of square feet that you need. So the math was right. It does come to 184,240 for the 3-unit buildings, but there is a typo there. Instead of that 2, it should be a 4. Now, the density bonus provisions of your ordinance are set forth in section 5.04. And they basically say you can be entitled to a density bonus, okay, above and beyond what you'd get, to the extent that you agreed to leave land in open space and not develop it. So that's the 2.1 acres. And we would be leaving 39% of the land undeveloped, the wetlands in the back. So that's 2.1 acres out of the 5.4, or 39% of the land would remain undeveloped. What the density bonus provisions then say is you can get a density bonus of up to 2 times whatever it is the percentage of the land that you are leaving undeveloped. So you could get a density bonus under the cluster zoning provisions for up to 78%. Now, what that would mean is that would equate to, we have 143,748 square feet. If you multiply that by, 1.78, or in other words, add 78% to it, you get the 255,871 square feet. So you're still not up to the 291,000. Okay, even with that density bonus.
Maximum density bonus.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So, and that's set forth in the summary, 291,360 square feet needed, but you only have 255,748, even with the 78% density bonus. I'll be right with you in a second.
You're about 35,000 short, even with the density bonus.
Correct, correct. For the specific proposal that's here. And so that's the specific proposal. We don't meet it. Now then I put, what I have next on the final exhibit is, by comparison, I looked at how much developable land would be needed, or what, with the density bonus, under 5.04 of your zoning ordinance, how would that look if instead of what we're proposing, which is 2 6-unit buildings and 4 3-unit buildings, we had 4 6-unit buildings, like they have at Plymouth Woods. Mm-hmm. And for reasons we've talked about, for aesthetics and open space and stuff, we don't want to propose that. But obviously, if you have the way the ordinance is set up, if you propose 6-unit buildings instead of 3 or 4-unit buildings, you need less land, because you need 53,000 for a 6-unit building. But you need something substantially more than that for 2 3-unit buildings, by way of comparison. So what I did, if were we to do that, and again, I'm citing to the density bonus provisions only in terms of what is reasonable. In other words, what is the spirit of your ordinance in terms of allowing density, allowing numbers of housing units. So this hypothetical proposal, not ours, but if we had 4 6-unit buildings, again, you start off at the top with 3.3, or 143,748 square feet, and that is for 4 6-unit buildings. So there you'd need 4 times 53,560, or 214,000 square feet, instead of the 291,000 square feet that you needed based upon the 3-unit buildings that we're mixing in. So what that translates to is we would need a density bonus of only 49%, were we to do that. Were we forced to do that? I guess we would if we could get that density. We don't want to do that. We don't think it's as aesthetically pleasing, or its livability is different, is less. So the summary there, it just said we would need a 49 density bonus, not the full 78%, that could be allowed under the zoning ordinance. And again, that's if we did this hypothetical approach of 4 6-unit buildings instead of the mix of units that we have proposed. So for all those reasons, I think that all of these criteria that we talked about bear on the variance as well. In other words, the variance is needed for density. I believe that the calculations are, if without any variance, and if you look at just 53,560 square feet for the 6-unit buildings, we would be entitled to 16 units.
Is that with the density bonus?
I,
Without any that's without any density bonus, that's just
correct.
straightforward? Oh, okay, 16 units, yep.
Correct. In other words, if we propose just six
Yeah.
unit buildings, you need 53,000 square feet for each one, and we have 143,000 square
So you
feet.
get about 3 6-unit buildings, yeah.
So it'd have, just short of, it comes to 16.1. Call it 16 units. So that's without any density bonus. So again, I don't think what we're asking for is unreasonable with the density bonus provisions.
But this density bonus, you're dedicating the land that you can't build on, the wet area.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Well, in order to get the density bonus, you need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which,
Yeah, there's
We-
different provisions that you could do.
right. Oh, yeah. I mean, and we're probably not gonna develop in that area in perpetuity anyway. I mean, that would.
Oh, the wet area.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
No, not the wet area, the
No, that's what he's talking about. That's-
common area.
No, he's talking about the wet area. He's getting the,
I'm talking, I'm
I'm
talking
hoping to
about,
get the density bonus based on the land, the 2.1 acres that you can't build on because it's wet.
correct.
Okay.
There's also other open areas, so to speak, that Mr. Audi spoke of.
That you could get the
of
density
some, about an
bonus.
acre
Yeah.
within the area where there are the 6-unit and the 3-unit buildings proposed.
Yeah.
So even without any density bonus, I think we'd be entitled to 16 units. We're asking for more than that. We think it's, we think a density bonus would be appropriate. And again, that's something for the planning board to determine. But I'm not even sure we would be applying to the planning board for an open space subdivision. Because that backland is probably not developable anyway, and perhaps not usable.
Yeah, we're not sure, this is sequential, and as I indicated, the delineation of the wetlands is, the.
Right, it's still not known.
Right, I mean, it's located, but it needs to have further explanation by the soil scientists, and it needs to be physically delineated on the ground, and also a site walk involved. So there's a lot of moving pieces, obviously, in this application.
Okay.
I'll wrap up quickly if I may. So, I've gone through the application for use variance that's set forth in our application. One of the criteria is that the use will not be contrary to the spirit of the ordinance. we think the spirit of the ordinance in terms of the number of units is set forth in your density provisions. I think we're entitled to 16 without any density bonus, and a density bonus would achieve a number of other units. One of the hardship test, as all of you may probably aware, has gone through a lot of changes over the years. It's now easier to meet. Previously, one of the criteria is that the proposal be a reasonable use of the property considering the unique setting of the property. It's a reasonable use, we believe. There are the other multifamily dwelling projects along the road, not far from this property. It's uniquely situated between two churches. It's not impacting on single-family dwellings, and on that basis, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, does anyone on the board have further questions? No, I'll say thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Puffer.
thank you.
For your input, and now I will open the public hearing to see if there is anybody in the audience that would like to speak. Yes, sir, could you please identify yourself?
My name is Steve Tatham. I'm here representing Chester, Ireland.
Okay.
My father-in-law, he owns the property directly behind this property.
Okay.
I am not speaking in opposition to the development in any way whatsoever. Mr. Ireland can't be here. He's almost 94 and is a resident of Grafton County, Nursing home at this time. I'm his son-in-law.
Okay.
When I became aware this property was for sale, I went to the realtor to ask them if they were aware that there is a deeded right-of-way through this property. I have a copy of the map, Mr. Ireland's map. I showed that to the realtor. They made a copy and said they would put it in the records. So whoever was going to buy this property should have been made aware that there was a deeded right-of-way through that property. What I'm here to speak about is that the deeded right-of-way has to remain in that property. It may affect how you can develop it. The right-of-way is where the tree line is on the western edge of that property, between it and the church. That's where the right-of-way is. Eventually, that's a timber lot. Mr. Ireland was the owner of Ireland Lumber Company here in Plymouth for many, many years. He bought it as a timber lot. Eventually, that's going to be logged.
Steve, how wide is the right-of-way?
Pardon me?
How wide is the right-of-way?
The deed does not say. It says a right-of-way, and I also have Sharon has a copy of the deed, as well as a written agreement between Merland McLeod, which would be Charlie's dad, and the written agreement says a right-of-way capable of handling trucks.
It is indicated, excuse me,
It is indicated
here on this schematic.
Okay.
where it goes through. So I'm just here to speak, again, not in opposition to the development in any way whatsoever, but just that the deeded right-of-way has to remain in place, and it has to be wide enough for log trucks. That tree boundary line will disappear when that land is logged, because that's where the right-of-way is. You mentioned the tree boundary between the church and this property. So at the initial stages, you had to be aware that there's a deeded right-of-way there, and that has to remain there. And again, I'm not opposed, Frank, I'm not opposed to development in any way whatsoever.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I know, I'm not opposed to it, I know you're a McLeod anyway. But everybody has to be aware that that's in there.
Wait a minute, so you're gonna go up that side and then, the right-of-way goes right through, straight up through?
Where the trees are.
Yeah, but on the wetlands there,
Look at the
it
color.
goes along here, and then it goes up here, right?
Correct.
There's a roadway
I'm
with
reading
a
it
culvert
right.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it comes right across, right
Yep,
here.
right here, and then it goes up
across
through there.
to his property in the back. Correct.
Okay.
And so, but there's no meets and bounds on it.
I can send this
It really
around.
changed all the right-of-ways.
There isn't in
they
the
make it so
deed,
tough.
there are no,
Did they scratch on that other map or what?
on this map, yeah, it's in
Right there in here.
Where the heck are
right
we?
here,
Down here?
right here, okay?
Okay, so,
That's where that tree line is.
You see it on this,
Yeah, right of way.
yeah, okay, so it just kind
Right.
of goes up along.
It
town
goes
a
up
few
there,
feet.
crosses right here, and then it goes in that wetland area. Right through the wetland. Okay, across, now this was all part of the McLeod property.
Yeah.
originally.
Madam Chair, we do have the surveyors here, so we shouldn't have too much cross,
hold on, we have to be able to, so people can follow the meeting.
Yeah, something like that.
A few years before he sold
Mr.
off the
Tatham,
front.
hold on, Mr. Tatham, we just have to make sure that people at home can hear what's going on.
I'm sorry.
So that's okay, it's just, we need
For the
one
minutes
person
also, there's a
at
lot of,
time,
yeah.
also for the minutes. So you were just showing us where your deeded right-of-way.
I was showing on this map where the deeded right-of-way is on that property.
Right, okay, well, thank you.
Whether that will affect the housing, present location houses or not, I do not know.
Right, well, everybody needs to know that.
Right, everybody
Yeah.
needs to know that,
I,
and that it has to remain there.
right, I did
Okay.
speak to Mr. Tatham the other day, and so, well aware that he was going to come this evening, and glad he's here just to bring this up to the board. However, this is an issue that will be dealt with in great detail by the planning board
Right.
should some approvals come forth, should this application get to that point. And also, I would respectfully suggest that at this opportunity, we do have the two surveyors here, Saborn and Tower Surveying, who did the boundary line adjustment, which this development was predicated on, the change in the lot shape. So perhaps, I don't know if they
well,
could speak to this also
Where
if
are
they're
the
willing.
surveyors? The surveyors are here? Why don't we let Mr. Tatham show them the maps?
Yeah, they're aware
Okay,
of this
they're aware.
Woods Road, so.
Oh, yes,
Can I speak to it too?
sure.
Yeah, we were aware of the right-of-way. And in
Okay.
fact, it's shown on
Yeah.
Right.
one of the exhibits. In fact, the schematic, I
Yes.
think, where it shows the layout of the different buildings. The deed doesn't fix the width for it, and it doesn't fix the location of that right-of-way. And so I think, so the developer is aware of it, and it's gonna have to deal with that
Right.
issue.
Good.
Generally, where someone has a right-of-way across someone else's property, they can have them move that right-of-way, of the location of it, if they ever want to come through, as long as they provide them with reasonable access out to, in this case, out to Fairgrounds Road. So we're aware of the issue, and we weren't trying to hide it or anything like that. It's there, and it's got to be dealt with. We don't think it would unduly impact the value of the property or the development. It would, I don't know when the property was last logged.
It's been a number of years.
I've heard 30 years, I've heard 40 years, so I don't, it's been a long time. So that, where the road is shown, it's going through that tree line, pretty hard to see a road now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything really there, but again, we could require them, as long as we give them reasonable access out to Fairgrounds Road, we could require it to be somewhere else, and it would certainly be our intent not to cut that tree line down. That's grown up over the years. Thank you.
And that would be no problem on our end.
Yeah.
And we don't care where it is, as long as there's one
Get in
through.
there, yeah.
Absolutely.
Understood. We're aware
Would
of
you
it.
like to see the map?
Mr.
Where-
Tatham?
Where it shows, okay.
Well aware of
Okay.
it. No, we're aware of it, and we understand that we need to give you access.
Okay, okay.
Mr. Tatham, just
That was my purpose in coming, just to make
Right.
sure everybody was aware of it.
at some point, little homework assignment, if you could get, this is the typed up agreement, there's no date on it. If you, I don't know if the original
Okay,
document has
I-
a stamp on the back, if it was filed at the registry or
I'll see if I can-
notarized.
yeah, I can-
I'd appreciate it,
I
it'll give
don't
us a
know if
little
it
bit
was,
of a
but I'll see if I can
timeline.
find that.
Thank you,
Okay, if I can, I'll get
yeah,
it to you.
thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Tatum, for
Thank you.
coming. Okay, surveyors?
Good evening. My name is Roy Saborn. I'm the Saborn and Saborn Tower. Mr. Tower is sitting there beside me this evening. We have done the boundary survey, and we actually did the boundary line adjustment plan that the planning board approved, and that was so that Francis and his wife could acquire a piece of this property that wasn't necessary for the project, and they also wanted the neighbors. And we did that, and on that plan that was recorded and went through the planning board, we did show the roadway and a note to the effect that, to our knowledge and Mr. McLeod, Francis's dad's knowledge, that's where the right-of-way was always located. It was there. I surveyed the adjacent property where the church is on the west side back in '83, I believe. And at that time, the roadway was quite distinct. I would agree with Mr. Puffer today. It is not that today. You get out towards the back end, towards the top of the bank, the back edge of the field is more obvious out there. But out near the street, it is not at all obvious at this point. I can walk it because that's what I do, but most people wouldn't even recognize it as a roadway. But Basically, to sum it up, the clients, the applicants are aware that there is a right-of-way there, and the Island family certainly does have a deeded right-of-way. The deed very explicitly says that there is a right-of-way to get to the back, and it had to be because that was the first piece deeded off by Charles McLeod's father. So there had to be a way getting to it, and obviously the right-of-way was in that document. I believe it was 1967. So, and that's in the paper record for the property in the back of the Islands.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Can you ask anything, sir? So what about that wet area? What do you know about that wet area there, Mr. Historian?
It's wet.
And is it like bubbling up from underneath, or is it
There's a little
drainage,
brook that runs down through it, little drainage brook. It's most of that area that we just did a rough top of bank delineation so that the architectural firm could see what we thought was pretty sure countable area. But there is certainly a bunch of the back, that couple acres that they speak about, that's definitely going to key out as wetlands. There's a little bit of it for sure that isn't going to, that they are not counting into their formula. And there may be additional beyond the crest of the bank. We just ran along the crest of the terrace bank, if you will. And some of that over the side of the bank very well may not key out as wet. But we went on the safe side, if you will, and just showed the top of the bank for their basic calculation purposes. But that will all be keyed out. We have a wetland scientist ready to go if we're given the direction to have that done.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is there anybody else in the public this evening that would like to comment, either for or against this project? No?
So
Okay.
it was like, how far did the abutters list go? I saw that on the thing, but it didn't really get
Well,
to.
I counseled the applicant to go beyond direct abutters, go across the street, go generally in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I believe we added 3 additional, I can give you the number.
No, I don't know, you went down a few
It's
lots.
a fair
though.
amount. Oh, here we go.
Right, and
Oh,
she did some site people who could see
let's see.
that would be affected by the view.
They were all abutters and former abutters
Right.
before the property had been.
So-
1, 2, 3,
transfer.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 property owner butters plus the principals, the professionals, so
Sure,
it's a reasonable amount.
great, okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, well, seeing no other comments, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I will open the discussion to the board to see what you would like to do here.
I'm going to speak for myself. When I look at the criteria that we have to judge this proposal on, I don't feel like I have enough information to make a good decision at this time,
Okay,
based on the fact that they don't have any impact studies for the schools. You know, they do have the sewer capacity, but that's about it. And they have the proposal from the state, the hearsay okay from the state on the sight line, road. There's no impact on the public schools. They don't have any decision on what they're gonna get if they get a bonus from the planning board. I think that's something that I'd have to look at. If you look at these previous projects, they all came very well prepared when they came and presented to the zoning board. I don't feel like we're in that same position right now, that you're well prepared to present to the zoning board this time.
okay, all right, well, thank you,
So I
Howard.
feel, I'd have to abstain on the vote.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Puffer's given us a lot of information, and to be honest with you, I would need more time to look through a lot of that stuff and review our planning stuff.
Okay, okay, how about Tom?
Tom, okay, yeah, well, you know, I guess we've got the 2 special exceptions, doesn't seem to be, I think the variance is like, that's really floating out there. I mean, I don't think you can give a variance on a supposed number and an assumed, what do you call it, that's, that's usually, they can get set for 18 units, they're all right for 18 units, and they want 20, or, if you want to make a variance for those extra 8 units that he's looking to get, that would kind of make sense, but putting it on this floating gauge of how much square foot they have and what the planning board may award, that's like, I don't think that's possible.
And when the other two projects came to us, they said, this is what we're gonna do, this is where they're gonna be, this is what we need to get them approved.
Right.
So I felt that they were prepared.
They just had, it was better fleshed out at that
Yes.
time. Okay,
I would
Freeman?
agree.
Pardon?
I would agree.
You would agree on that? Okay, well, I would say, I appreciate Mr. Puffer's presentation, I think, but I felt myself it was very just preliminary and premature for the request for a variance for something that you're not even sure if you're gonna go with a cluster development proposal to the planning board. And based on my, review of the zoning ordinance, I know all the density requirements especially, or how dense your project's allowed to be, that's a planning board decision. And that usually comes up and the discussion is fleshed out in a pre-application with the planning board, their pre-application review. So I would just, myself, without having the wetlands information also and without any kind of site review, I would think that we could continue the meeting. I would feel more comfortable waiting until, a time certain that we had more information available to us as far as confirmation of the amount of wetlands. And then certainly with the planning boards, weighing in with the planning board as far as the density requirements. But after a site review, I would think we could at least entertain the special exceptions.
Yeah, they can all be.
Those don't seem to be, a problem. It's the variance with the density that's being requested and without anybody having been able to visit the site and to know exactly what's being proposed and asked from us. So that's what I would suggest, if that's acceptable. Otherwise, we could go through our criteria and vote tonight, but I'm just not sure if the members don't seem to feel like we have enough information that would be favorable for the applicant.
Yeah, are you talking about voting on the special exceptions, but not the density variance, or?
Well, anything tonight. I really feel a site view at this point would be for what's being proposed, because it is so big compared to what else is out there. I mean, the number of units or the number of beds per unit on the piece of land. And that I don't feel comfortable personally being asked for a variance when the planning board hasn't even considered, the cluster development concept or anything like that. And I understand sometimes you have to proceed, put all your irons in the fire and kind of move them along as you go. So we want to be helpful, but I want the members to feel like we have enough information to make a decision that would be favorable for, at least fair in the eyes of the applicant.
In these other two proposals, I felt that we were working hand in hand with the planning board, because they would say, you need this from the zoning board. The zoning board would say, you need this from the planning board. And so we were working, it took a long time to get those proposals through, and they were well presented.
There was a lot of, I think the issue at hand is that things were moving somewhat simultaneously
Right.
Right.
or congruently.
Right. And
Yeah, and.
at least having an approval from the planning
Right.
board that a cluster development is appropriate in this area, that kind of thing, because then you get more density.
Right, because.
But to just ask us to grant a variance when we're not even sure that's going to be the configuration, and we don't know for sure if the wetlands are, the exact amount of wetlands and that you can build on for us to say, oh, we would approve, fewer structures or fewer rooms. I think that's what we're feeling.
And there is the opportunity, as you know, in the zoning ordinance in Article 5, Chapter 5, to do essentially a pre-application for the planning board in terms of cluster development. To my knowledge, it's it's a zoning flexibility that hasn't been used to a
Right,
great
see, if they grant
extent.
that, right, we use it for that other
Not my history, but
fairgrounds
certainly not,
development. It was right
I don't
before
think
you
it's been
came.
invoked since it's been
No,
on the books.
but if they approve your cluster development, then we don't have to give you a variance. And to,
Right.
you know, that's what I'm feeling, like our variance, why should we grant a variance, which is basically saying you can violate our zoning ordinance, if there's a provision in the zoning ordinance that says, oh, here, you can get more density because you're doing X, and whether it's putting in a community garden or whatever it is. I remember these discussions from when we had that other proposal for the Fairgrounds Road. They were very close to working something out, and then I think the economy, I forget why it didn't go forward. But there was working hand in glove with the planning board, and I feel like we're almost being asked to do the planning board's job before they have a chance to do it with that cluster development possibility. So if, we're happy to work along with them, and I know there's a pre-approval or pre-site plan that you can go and mention all of this to them and get their guidance, because they're the people in the community that we, have the expertise in figuring all of that out. And then if they want you to get a variance or special exception, I think that would be, we'd feel more comfortable in that respect.
One of our concerns is that the cluster or the open space provisions, I believe, has applicability to where you're presenting separate subdivided lots. In other words, how many lots, and therefore how many units can you have? So I'm not even sure that we can apply to the planning board
Right.
for
We're
that
not
type-
sure, because this is a one-lot development with multiple buildings. It's a bit of a,
Right.
it's the inverse, if you will. So we're still trying to,
Okay, well, I think probably we should ask for the input from the planning board, but even if we could go on the joint site visit, I think everybody would feel more, better about what can be done and what can't, because we really haven't, we're not
I-
able to see with the weather, the way it's been too, how, what we're talking about, whether it's supportable on the amount of land that's there. Okay?
it's not, the applicant should not be given any demerits or anything for this. It's complex and it's unusual. I'm not saying it's not undoable, but it seems like every time we've all gotten to something, then we realize we have to take a step back, and I think that's what the issue is here. And again, I would suggest, if it's the board's pleasure, since we do have approximately a month to the next ZBA date, that we've already received permission, general tacit permission for a site walk, that we may have to slog through, get out there and see what we've got in terms of
Well, I know that would make me
suitability.
feel more comfortable if we had a site view before and then welcome. Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Puffer, that we continue the meeting?
Certainly.
And just take in the more information, and also mention to the planning board that we'd hope to have some guidance or.
Yeah, I think if it was amenable to the principals and if we could have our guides, our surveyors, one or the other, both with us, I think that would go a long way.
Okay, I think that's a good plan. Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Puffer?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Okay.
We were trying to move it forward in good faith because we have a P&S that says
Right.
by a certain date, you've got to get your approvals.
Right.
So we had to make a good faith attempt to do that. We may now, if you're continuing it, need to get an extension on that, on the P&S.
Okay, well, I would appreciate that, just because, and again, it's nothing, we appreciate that you're coming early, but I almost feel it's a little premature for the zoning to get, to give out passes basically before we really have it a little more fleshed out, and we have the certitude of how much wetlands.
Yeah.
So that then, everybody can calculate how many units we think are supportable on that land.
And I think, too, the reason we came to this board first was, in the classic, typical situation, you do go to the zoning board first if you need a variance.
Right.
Because if you don't get the variance, why go to the planning board and have a fully engineered plan and so forth? So we followed that usual
I see.
procedure
Right.
before going through the whole planning board process. But we understand we may not be able to do that here.
Right, I think in this instance, because of the density that you're seeking, that would be, we want to work hand in glove with the planning board. So I appreciate your willingness to just continue, and I would entertain a motion to continue. the
Does it
meeting?
have to be next month, or do we?
No, it doesn't have to be. It's to a date certain. I mean, I would suggest that we keep our regular first Tuesday schedule on this, just to keep everybody from going crazy.
Right, so,
Okay.
I mean, so we need time to hear back when we can have the site view? Yes, sir?
Well, our due diligence would have been a soil report in December, but every time we had another foot of snow,
Right,
weather is
exactly.
not
somebody would do it because of that, which is understandable.
Right,
So we would have had something to present, had that worked out, so
right.
we're just
Yeah,
going
no,
along
we
here,
understand.
trying to fill our way through. So I make a motion, that we have a prayer that we have no more snow.
Right.
So next week we can,
Yeah, is a month long enough? I
yeah.
don't want to go there, I don't think, but
Well, I think a month would be long enough, so why don't we, I would entertain a motion from,
I would move.
Motion to propose, to continue the meeting till the time the developer's ready to
yes.
proceed.
Second.
okay,
Okay, so that's,
so till developer, so why don't, can we leave it open-ended
The
like that?
applicant is
Till the
ready.
applicant is ready to obtain, or to
Well,
further
this is-
inform us?
Continue the meeting.
Okay,
Continue the meeting.
yeah, let's continue the meeting. We have to continue it to a date certain, otherwise we have to go through the whole re-notification process
Okay,
again.
well
So we
then-
want to say May 2nd.
yeah, May 2nd.
2017, and if I could suggest also a motion by the board for a site walk, and I'll get the particulars of that
Okay.
going.
Sure, I'll make that motion.
Okay, Tom, motion for a site walk?
Second.
Butch, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and all in favor of the first motion that was still on the table? Aye. Aye, okay, 2 motions passed. So we are continued till May 2nd?
You are kind of on a plus side already, though, because nobody's here speaking against the development. And that was something that we dealt with a lot in the other 2 developments, so.
Right.
Yeah. Could we get notification of the site walk in case the soil scientist or whoever wants to be out there?
I'll
with-
email,
sure,
yeah, no,
sure,
that
sure.
would be a good thing. I'd say the more the merrier. We've already gotten through Mr. Gowan, or, I don't know, it's someone, I've got an email somewhere that said it was cool to take a sidewalk, just let us know. So I'll just keep
Yeah,
everybody in the
okay,
loop.
so I don't know, you know,
Yes.
John may want to go,
Certainly,
Dan White
yeah.
may want to go, I don't know
Yeah,
at this point. That's-
So I would
that'd be
hope
great.
that that's in a couple of weeks, because we don't want it,
yeah, it
the
would be
minute-
nice if we could do that before the
Monday
next
before
meeting.
the meeting.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll try to
okay.
get that ASAP, depending on the weather.
Okay. All right, well, I thank you, and thank you for your presentation tonight, Mr. Puffin. Thank you for everybody for coming.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now let's look at the rest.
Patrice, you've already walked it though.
Pardon?
You've already walked it.
I know I have. I know I have. Many times.
Did she retain it?
Yeah,
She took pumpkins home.
yeah, Charlie's Garden. That's what I mean. It's Charlie's Garden. All right, now where is my agenda? Is that yours? Oh, no. Where the heck is my agenda? All right, here we are. All right, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business?
No,
I don't-
I make a
okay.
motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Howard's anxious. Second, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for coming. All in favor? Aye. All right, adjourned.
I'm sorry, so was Howard and who?
8:30. It was Howard and...